So having made good fortune in technology, I know it is a two-edged sword, and I will talk about that a little bit in the course of my remarks, which I've entitled An Education Seder. We are, yes, in fact, opening our Jewish Delicatessen on Mercer Island on Monday, and knowing that Passover is just past us, I thought I would say that we're having an educational Seder today. A Seder actually in Hebrew means order or sequence. And in the order or sequence of the Passover Seder, the youngest child starts out by asking 4 questions, and then the rest of the Seder, everybody then explains the answers to those questions. So being first, certainly not being the youngest anymore on the panel, I'm going to raise 4 questions that I've reflected upon in the last few weeks since being invited to speak, and in the last 2 years since leaving Eastside Prep to start with my wife, Sanderson Ventures, first major project of which is the Delicatessen. And I titled it about the kinds of adults we want to foster in society, because as all of you know, a good curriculum in school is founded by starting at the end, going with the objectives. What do you want to do at the end of this course, this unit, these years of school, and then designing backwards to achieve that objective. And so what I thought I would focus on is the end result, which is adults. And of course, those of us who are adults know that at no moment are we the end product. This is a babka. It's kind of a little bit mysterious on the outside and a bit crusty, but you open it up, it gets very much more interesting on the inside. We will be sampling this at the break. But the reason I wanted you to talk about a babka is that the subtitle of my first section is called Just Make Something. This babka is a real product. It's a physical, tangible thing that a person made. And that person's name is Andrew, and he is our baker. And as you can see from the babka, he is an artist and a craftsman, and he's also many other things. From when we were interviewing him, for example, we said to him, well, why are you a baker instead of a chef? You know, chefs, the thing about them is they take food that already tastes good, and they make it taste better. The thing that's nice about being a baker is we take stuff that really doesn't taste too good, flour and yeast and stuff, and we make something that really tastes wonderful. So he's not only a craftsman and an artist, he's a philosopher. And in fact, and a poet. Called a babka because babka comes from the same origin word as bubby, which means grandmother, and the swirls in the babka are meant to resemble the hoop skirt of the grandmother at the turn of the century over in Europe, and that's how it got its name, babka. So it turns out he's a historian as well. One thing he's not is a college graduate. What kind of jobs, I'm not sure whether baker is one of the top jobs we hold in high esteem, but to ask ourselves the question about what are the jobs that we hold in the highest esteem, and what kind of jobs should we be holding highest esteem, because our kids, as they're going through the educational system, will be aiming for those things. And so if we send messages out to our kids about what's good, what's valued, what's important, it's an important thing about what they do and where they aim their education for. So that is question number 1. Section number 2, I call Mr. X versus Mr. Y, or which is also the myth of the knowledge worker, because I'm going to argue that this notion that in the 21st century we are creating knowledge workers is a bit of a misnomer, that knowledge really isn't a product, and there are many valuable things that our society needs to do, knowledge being an ingredient. When we started the restaurant, after my wife and I, and then hired our CFO Cheryl, who's in the audience today, we thought we wanted to have someone to run the restaurant. We put together a list of the things that we thought would be great for the person who would run it on a day-to-day basis. That person comes with what is called a resume. And that resume, we said, wouldn't it be great if they came from Mercer Island? Wouldn't it be great if they were Jewish, highly educated, young and aggressive? And we found a person who exactly was that. He said, I want to be your restaurateur. He had gone after he went to Stanford, where he created his own major in technology and entrepreneurship. He worked at a number of companies, like he was assistant to the chairman of LinkedIn, and then decided he had a passion for food and went in and tried to help out some local chefs here. He left us. Why did he leave us? He was a piece of paper. He had not had really any life experience of actually doing something, but presented himself as someone who could bring off his vision. And in fact did not come to us with anything more than a resume, without experience really to do it. On the other hand, let me tell you about Mr. Y. Mr. Y didn't watch the video on the School of Hard Knocks, but clearly went through the School of Hard Knocks. Lost his father at age 2, lost his mother at age 10, was adopted by the stepfather who had married the mother, but then when the stepfather remarried, he disowned this person and sent him to live with his biological grandparents at their old age community. So this is a kid, but he comes into us with such incredible heart, such incredible soul. He, I hope I'm not making a theme here at a college preparatory school, didn't go to college. But he decided that it would be interesting to work in a restaurant. Started at the very bottom level. He did busing, he did waiting, he did wait managing, he did bartending, he did barista. He did every job that he needed to do and thought very much about himself and who he was and who he wanted to be. One of the things he was in origin was Jewish and was not connected to it. And he felt a magical calling when he came in that room for the interview with us that says, you know what, I feel at home here, and if you hire me, I will do everything I can to make this the kind of place that you people have dreamed of being. That's the kind of person that will really kind of make our restaurant really work. And is the kind of person with the life experience that actually makes valid all of what he's about to do for us. And so really question number 2 is, where are the apprenticeships of today? I mean, had Mr. X spent the time and wanted to put in the effort to pay his dues, he would have been ready, even at age 26, 27, to do what we had wanted him to do and what he presented as trying to do. The person who went through that apprenticeship, and they are out there, was able to grow and develop and become a more fully realized person, ready to contribute to the effort that was trying to go on. If you want to read more about this, there is a book called Shop Class is Soul Craft. The author of this book actually was two-track. He went all the way through getting a PhD in political philosophy, but at the same time, when he was 14, he apprenticed into an electrician, learned how to wire circuits, then became an auto mechanic, and finally decided after a series of unfulfilling academic, knowledge workery only jobs, that what would truly fulfill him was running a motorcycle repair shop. And I think we'll hear a lot of theme about that from other speakers today in terms of doing the things you're passionate about and love, and that's how he's created his career. It's a great book, not very long, I recommend it. The last adult that I'd like to talk about today is me. And because one of my themes is that if you are not a self-reflective human being, you will not be a fully developed adult. And the most successful people that we work with, what have I found in common to them, is that these people are self-reflective. They know what they've done well, they know what they haven't done well, and have a willingness to want to get better. And if we in our education system can inculcate that in them, we've done a very, very good job. So the subtitle is The Promise and the Peril of Technology. Because technology, like the beginning of our conference today, has its promise and its perils alike. My life at age 52 has paralleled this marvelous technological innovation that we have. When I went through the Lexington public school systems, and I'm not the only person in the room to have, Laurie Benelow was a grade behind me at Lexington High School in Massachusetts, and then into Princeton we were dealing with paper tapes and punch cards, but it was exciting to program a computer and get those things done. My reflection now, 52 years later, I'm about to go back to Princeton for my 30th reunion, is that Princeton gave me a brilliant academic education, but they didn't teach me to be introspective and thoughtful, and as much as a great school it was, it could have been even better if it was like a later school that I went to, Seattle University, where being a Jesuit institution, you got both. I then was very lucky and stumbled into a company called Microsoft in 1984. Prior to that, I worked at Bain Company, so these were kind of my large company experiences. Apple II was the computer, and it was the introduction of the PC. And nevertheless, by being the first person to really get onto the Apple II, I made myself very important and helpful to the bosses at Bain Company, and of course, at Microsoft, was able to ride a wonderful wave of the growth of that company. But I decided that a large company wasn't for me. I went back to school at Seattle University, and then I came here to this lovely place. And a lot of that wouldn't have been possible without the internet. I mean, to go into School of Education, and what the internet has provided us teachers in the ability to generate, teaching material is pretty unparalleled. And students have the opportunity to have access to that, also unparalleled, but with the equivalent downside, all related to the things that you can get there. Finally, as we've started a small business, and as I said at lunch, everybody, I think, in America should start a small business at some time to know what it's like to hire people, to have payroll, to deal with the government and your local community. We're now in the age of Facebook and Twitter and iPads and smartphones, and I don't tweet and I don't do Facebook, but what it's done for the deli in terms of people's interest in it already is pretty amazing. And so I can really have seen both sides of it. So there's a lot of talk, more than can be in my 18-minute speech or even in our whole day, about technology and what it can provide for education and for adults. But of course, the tremendous trade-off is about kids and adults who are disconnected, who are distracted, who think that multitasking is actually efficient and effective when I don't think it really is. And do we give into it? Do we fight that way, which is an endless battle with every new technology, or do we incorporate it? And my question is, can a great idea be encapsulated in 140 characters? And as I thought about it, and I read about one teacher who in New York, in fact, does give assignments to write a great 140-character aphorism, I thought to myself, I'm going to go back to Confucius and see, did he write in 140 characters? Because I think he might have gotten that short. You can do a great idea in short form, and I'd argue that you really need to. And you can't do anything long without first doing something great short. At the same time, you can't stop there, and I still think there's a tremendous role for writing great, long research papers, and every student should go through it. But giving out, having people write tweets or Amazon.com book reviews, or you want to sell something on eBay, please write the description for it. As English assignment, as this professor is doing, actually strikes me as relatively valid and an interesting way to kind of embrace the technology and then use it for good end. And in this regard, there are two books that I would mention to you. One of them is called Alone Together. First half of the book is about robotics. The second half is about social media, like Facebook. And it's a very interesting exploration of what technology has done to our connectedness with ourselves and to others. And a book called The Shallows, which talks about how the posits that the internet can rewire our brains in ways that aren't necessarily good. There are people who will have the other argument to that, and that debate is a very, very healthy debate for us to do, both as adults and as students. And my final question, and again this goes on the promise and the peril of technology, is that I reflect upon myself as a relatively unconnected person as a young adult. I had parents who were great, but as I look back on it, a couple of years of therapy behind me, we're a bit, distant and remote. And I think that helped me at Microsoft, and in the age and the culture that company was in at the time. So I can't regret that. But as an adult who's met an incredible woman and married 3 years ago, and realized how critically important it is for myself and my community and my kids to be a connected and reflected and ethical human being. And my regret that I have not been able to have achieved that earlier in life, and wonder if those qualities of reflectiveness, of ethics, with all the political correctness that potentially comes up when you talk about ethics and morality and religion, how can that be taught in our schools so that we don't have mortgage bankers and investment bankers that feel that they can ride off the backs of poor people, loaning them more money than their houses are really worth, as a thing that happens in our society. And the second half of that is to say, how can we fund this in a way that is keeping with our social values? Because the way we structure our schools tells a very strong message to our children. And so our public school system today, I would argue, is broken in its funding model, and that we need a Marshall Plan for education, as it were, that changes the way things are done. We are very lucky at Eastside Prep. It's an independent school. We have a bunch of involved parents who give a lot of money to make this education possible for these people. If you live in Medina, you're also good in the public schools. You put a lot of tax dollars into your own kids' education. What's happening over at Rainier Beach, however, is not so good. And unless we're able to change that, we're not going to be able to change the expectations that every kid has when they go into that education system. Because what we know is that if we teach kids and they have no expectation of a bright future, they're not going to do well. So I want to suggest that Howard Gardner has a book called Truth, Beauty, and Goodness. There's a book called God and the Machine about robotics and what that tells us about religion and humanity and what makes us human. But I do want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. And these thoughts got on our wedding t-shirt. So if you want to have something with a crystallized message, you put it on a t-shirt, right? So our expression that we had from T.S. Eliot when we got married 3 years ago was that only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. And I think our responsibility as adults and as teachers is to push our children farther than they think they can go, to see how far they really truly can go. And we had 3 words on the back of our t-shirt: good, lasting, and true. And it's what we wanted to say about ourselves and our marriage. But I believe that if we can educate our kids to recognize what's good, value, lasting, and true, to nurture it, and to contribute to good, lasting, and true themselves, then we'll create a much better society. Thank you very much.